Will a meeting of Gulf state and Muslim world leaders shake the foundations of U.S., Israel, and Arab relations? After Qatar was attacked on Tuesday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio visited Israel. Meanwhile, Muslim and Arab leaders are trying to formulate their own response to Israel's attack. So might we finally see Muslim world unity channeling a collective response? And would it marginalize U.S. and Israeli power? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. Tuesday's shocking Israeli attack on Doha has left Gulf states reeling. Just 5 years after the Abraham Accords were signed by Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain, and 8 years after Saudi led a full blockade on Qatar, Gulf and Muslim state leaders are now meeting in Doha to discuss unity and a coordinated response to Israeli and U.S. actions. But does this really mark a turning point? Should an attack on one GCC country be considered an attack on all? Or will the outrage turn into little more than another statement of condemnation, ultimately changing nothing? Here's a look.
On Monday, Muslim and Arab leaders gathered in Qatar in response to last week's Israeli strike that targeted Hamas leadership, killing 5 members, although not the negotiators, and 1 Qatari security personnel. The Gulf nation has long played a key mediating role in conflicts around the world, including Israel's war on Gaza. Ahead of the summit, Qatar's Prime Minister described the Israeli strike as an attack on the principle of mediation itself.
We must not remain silent and calm in the face of these barbaric attacks and take real and tangible measures on all levels to prevent further attacks, which if we leave it, it will not stop. We will find ourselves, no matter what, in front of an endless series of blood and destruction, and no one will be far from its harm and danger.
Despite the widespread condemnation, Israel remains defiant, signaling further attacks are possible. US President Donald Trump said he was very unhappy with Israel's attack on Washington's strong Gulf ally. Qatar is home to the largest US military base in the region, and the two countries signed $1.2 trillion worth of agreements in May. Now that those close ties are at risk, Trump met with the Qatari Prime Minister at a dinner in New York and assured him that the attack won't be repeated, and warned Israel to be careful towards the Gulf state. The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, meanwhile, is in Israel holding talks. He said the US has constantly engaged with its Gulf allies and praised strong relations.
The people of Gaza deserve a better future, a future which is not possible until the hostages are all released and Hamas no longer exists. All these fundamentals still exist. They all still have to be addressed. And that's what we're going to remain focused on as we engage with our allies in the Gulf, is how can we continue to work together to address those 3 things which we think are pillars. Solving those are pillars of the broader construct I think all of us hope for the region.
The US-sponsored Arab normalization process with Israel is also under threat. Last week, the United Arab Emirates, the first country to sign the Abraham Accords, summoned Israel's ambassador over the Doha attack. Frustrated by that incident and Israel's ongoing offensive in Gaza, Gulf countries are warning Israel of consequences.
The Israeli Prime Minister, who boasts of having changed the face of the Middle East over the past 2 years, actually means that Israel can enter any place it wishes, whenever it wishes. He dreams of turning the Arab region into an Israeli sphere of influence, and this is a dangerous illusion.
The summit in Doha presents a glimpse of rare unity among the Muslim world against what they call Israel's threat to peace in the whole region. This, while Israel appears to be on a collision course with its Middle Eastern neighbours, who had only until recently been accepting of closer ties. Its attack on Doha has clearly crossed a major line. But will this be the moment of collective action and accountability for Israeli aggression.
Joining me now to debate how Arab and Muslim nations may and should respond to Israel's attack on Doha are from London, Ontario. Former UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, Michael Lynk. From London in the UK, historian and professorial research associate at SOAS London, Haim Bresheeth. And from Doha, professor of political science at Qatar University, Yusuf Bouandel. Thanks all so much for being with me. Haim, I'll start with you. And before we look forward, let's cast our minds back quickly to last week. Even though the Israeli military carried out the attack and takes, full responsibility for it, you believe there was so much complicity on all sides just in managing the logistics of the strike that are these talks in Doha now basically futile because everyone is kind of being duplicitous?
Well, I treat it as a soap opera for the intellectually challenged. Basically, the attack was so complex to organize and involved so many states and so many military systems that you've got to be really limited in order to believe, for example, that the Trump administration didn't know about it, that the Doha facilities didn't know about it, that the countries in which airspace the Israelis flew didn't know about it. I mean, this is flying over Syria, Iraq, and of course, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Not only that, it required in-flight refueling, which the Americans and the British did above Doha. If nobody knew about it, they definitely knew after, and they allowed the Israelis to go back. We are told that there were 15 planes. I don't know why they used 15 planes, because there were 6 bombs, but that's up to the Israelis.
Okay.
Now, over all this flight, they are using friend or foe signals to the radar. So they would immediately be discovered as they fly over Syria, because there are American bases there. And there are American bases in Doha, of course. This is nonsensical.
Okay, so what are these talks going to achieve, if that's your analysis?
Well, I don't think that they're going to achieve anything. Basically, the Gulf states are actually married to the Abraham Accords. Even Saudi Arabia, they didn't sign it, is normalizing Israel. No sanctions have been applied during the flight and the bombing. No sanctions are suggested by the meeting. We've had the report from the meeting. And basically, they just say, oh, we didn't like it. Like Trump said he didn't like it. This is nonsensical. I mean, this is not going to stop Israel doing what it always does. And they use the negotiations in order to locate the negotiators and kill them. This is the only reason why America and Israel agreed to negotiate.
Okay. Michael Lynk. Let me just get your response to that analysis. I mean, it is harsh, obviously, but yeah, are we ignoring some very obvious complicity and duplicity on behalf of the United States, the Arab states that could have been involved, that make these talks, again, I'll use the word, futile and a show of what should be obvious moving towards Arab unity, to form a united front, to stop the kind of Israeli aggression that keeps being condemned, but no action being taken?
I think there's a lot of sense in what Haim has said. It's almost impossible to believe that the United States wouldn't have known, even if it hadn't been given advanced warning that this is what the Israelis were going to do. There are so many tracking positions that the Americans would have realized that a strike was on its way, particularly given the fact that they have a huge military base in Qatar, which is meant primarily to protect Qatar and the and the Gulf states from Iran. If they couldn't detect Israeli planes coming there, then Qatar should be asking why they're spending $10 billion on financing the American base. Either the United States didn't know in advance. And one would have thought that the Americans would have, if that was the case, the Americans would have been clear in giving bright red lines to the Israelis on what they can and can't do during the course of this atrocious military campaign in Gaza. Or the Americans did know and did nothing to stop it, which does suggest duplicity. I think this is also a pattern with respect to Benjamin Netanyahu, that he's learned that it's better in his relationships with the United States to seek forgiveness afterwards than to ask for permission beforehand.
So, Michael, I mean, as for the U.S. and some of its Arab allies here, mainly those, let's say, involved in the Abraham Accords that Haim mentioned, is this all completely cynical? Are they just building some kind of facade of disapproval when they know full well that they, especially in the case of the United States, they share Israel's ultimate vision of destroying any chance for not just a Palestinian state, but Palestinian existence on what they consider Israeli land?
Either they share that vision or they don't really care deep enough to rupture existing relationships, particularly around the Abraham Accords and their relationships with the United States. If I have to think that, at this point in time, the Arab political leadership in the Middle East has never been more irrelevant on the regional and international stage than it has now. If these Arab states, 5 or 6 of them, which do have diplomatic relationships with Israel in the aftermath of the Abraham Accord, and they have continued to deepen their economic relationships with Israel during the course of this 23-month-old horrific military campaign in Gaza, and have not taken steps to try to either signal their deep disapproval or indeed break these economic and diplomatic relations, then one wonders what would ever move them to want to take a tougher stance towards Israel and the United States. I'm old enough to remember what happened in the aftermath of the 1973 Ramadan War, when the Arab world, particularly the oil producers, wound up imposing much higher costs through a cartel on oil shipments to Europe and North America, which caused an extraordinary diplomatic and economic disruption. I don't see anything in the current Arab leadership which suggests either the vision or the courage to want to do something that will disrupt this relationship and stop the continuation of this war in Gaza.
So, Yusuf, again, what is this all for? Is there any real prospect here for change in the overall dynamics, whereby finally the Arab and Muslim world might say, enough? We don't need to be at the mercy of Israel and the United States. It's not worth the economic interest that we have in it, and we should come together as brothers. Is there any chance of that happening here, especially given the fact that there's been attacks on their own territory and not least the genocide in Gaza?
Well, I do agree with the two guests in their explanation of what's been happening. Obviously, Israel has had a free hand, attacked several Arab countries recently, including Tunisia and most of all Qatar. Last week, there has been an outpour of support for Qatar from different countries in the Arab world and also throughout the world. I mean, the unanimous decision by Security Council is a case of this situation. We saw the president of the United Arab Emirates. He came to Qatar and showed his support to the Qatari leadership. But like the gentleman from Canada said, at least those countries that have diplomatic relations with Israel should have been at the forefront and maybe cancel diplomatic ties or call their ambassadors, ask the Israeli ambassador in their own respective countries to go. Secondly, as far as the attack is concerned, it's absurd to think that the Americans didn't know about it in particular. And and it gives another indication or proof, if proof is needed, that Israel has a free hand to do whatever it wants with the support of the American administration. Now, as far as this meeting is concerned, I do not necessarily think that will be a united front. It will come out that at the end of the day, they will come with strong condemnation of what Israel has done. And as far as the future is concerned, it would be, and I'm sorry today to say this, business as usual. The Arab countries are not going to unite for the specific or different reasons.
So disappointing. Okay, Haim, let me come back to you because we have seen at least the outcome of this meeting between U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Benjamin Netanyahu. It cannot go unsaid that, first of all, the United States envoy was sent to Israel first, not to Doha. It was sent to Israel first for this meeting. And Marco Rubio came out of it only saying Hamas cannot exist. Iran is really the enemy of peace. No condemnation whatsoever of Israeli action. And stressing again that this all started on October 7th. So the U.S. has not moved at all, has it?
I think the U.S. has actually moved to support Israel even stronger in the face of the attack, in the face of the nonsense noises that come out of the Arab capitals and the meeting in Doha, in the face of the fact that they had the Doha airport didn't stop the flights during the attacks. Now you understand that in order to do that, they had to clear a path which had to be agreed beforehand by the Israelis and the Doha authorities. We know that a lot of people knew about it beforehand, not least the Hamas negotiators, because they left the room, leaving their telephones there. A clear mark that they knew that they are targeted, and they were not waiting to be killed like, chicken in a shooting range. So we now have the Arab states, the Americans, the Brits, who also knew about it and did the refueling in the air. After 2 years of genocide, after 7 countries attacked by Israel, the attack on Doha is the 7th one in the region, they are all supporting Israel as the engine of chaos in the Middle East, because this is what the West is doing. The West is creating failed states from Lebanon to Syria, starting in Iraq, Yemen, the next one they tried to destroy in the same manner is Iran, and Pakistan is next because the Israelis are now supporting the Baluchi resistance movement. This is a West Asia project by Israel and the US to make Israel the only force in the Middle East. And you can see that it is. That's where the script is written, in Jerusalem.
I mean, that's a very encompassing analysis there. Michael, I'm not sure if you agree with the breadth of what Haim was describing, but I'd actually like to go back to look specifically at, what's going on between Doha, the Arab states, and Israel and Gaza now. Is it worth even talking about indulging, can we call it the fantasy of ceasefire negotiations? I mean, yes, Haim was saying the negotiators themselves did survive, but even many Israelis really seem to recognize that Netanyahu isn't serious about bringing hostages home and negotiating. So is he only continuing a strategy to, achieve the ultimate goal of, again, removing the Palestinians from both Gaza and the West Bank? And is that by default what the U.S. wants again as well?
Look, I think all of this suggests 2 things with respect to the relationships between the United States and Israel. First, I think that the current American foreign policy leadership are really true amateurs when it comes to international diplomacy. And second, and related to that, that they really have no thought through strategy, either in dealing with the Netanyahu government or in how to enforce a ceasefire and end the genocide, other than always being reactive and being constantly played by the Netanyahu government. If the United States wanted a ceasefire, and I'm talking about both in the Biden administration and the Trump administration, one single phone call would have done that. Recall back in June of 2024, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 2735 on the 10th of June. It was a loud demand that there be an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and that was supported by the United States. In fact, much of the drafting was done by the Biden administration, and yet for the 7 remaining months that the Biden administration was in power, no ceasefire was effected. I think back, because again I'm old enough to remember that it took a single phone call by Ronald Reagan to end Israel's military invasion of Lebanon in 1982, despite the protests of then Prime Minister Menachem Begin. That's all it would take, because the Israel is so dependent upon the United States for diplomatic cover, for economic aid, and for military weaponry. If the United States opposed this, this would have stopped. If it continues, it's because the United States continues to wind up supporting the strategy of the Netanyahu government.
Okay. Yusuf, in order to achieve the unity that the Arab and Muslim world is mentioning now, help us understand who would have to sacrifice the most for that unity. What is really preventing that unity? What, if I can call it that, what selfish interests are on the table that are stopping the Arab and Muslim world from coming together to reject U.S. and Israeli hegemony in this sphere?
Well, before I answer this question, I'd like to make a comment about what Haim said, that the Hamas's leadership knew about the attack. I mean, I would like to disagree with him on this particular point. They may have suspected they would be targeted, but let's not forget that the members of Hamas's negotiating team lost close members of their families. I would expect, as a father, if I am being a target, I wouldn't want my son to be in the place that Israel would target and lose a close member of my family. Hamas's leadership might have suspected, but not necessarily knew about it. That's my view of the situation. As far as the Arab countries are concerned, I think that most of them, or at least the traditional powers in the Arab world. I mean, Iraq it's a failed state today. Syria has its own internal problems. Libya also has its own internal problems. Yemen, and so on and so forth. So the only major players are Algeria on the one hand.
What about just the GCC?
Gulf countries. The GCC is completely divided as far as Israel is concerned. They talk the talk, but there are no actions. For instance, Mohammed bin Salman said that all Saudi Arabia's resources are under the disposal of Qatar. Like I said previously, the president of the United Arab Emirates came to Doha on Wednesday, but still diplomatic and economic ties with Israel as they were before. The only country that, 3 countries in the GCC, like Qatar, it's Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Oman, are saying that they would be willing to establish diplomatic ties with Israel, provided that there would be a Palestinian state to the borders of 1967. Only Kuwait is the exceptions. I think that it's very, very difficult to achieve this particular unity at this stage. At least they could, the countries that have diplomatic ties with Israel could do was to ask at least the Israeli ambassador to leave their countries, like a number of countries in Latin America have done.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we're down to our last minutes. Haim, I just want to ask you quickly, I'd like to hear your perspective on this question, because you are a veteran of the 1967 war, and you've written extensively about the cynical and destructive role of Israel's military in forming and maintaining Israel and its identity. So would you have predicted we'd be here today witnessing what's happening with the Arab and Muslim world and what's happening in Gaza? Would you have seen this coming this bad?
I don't think I predicted the level of brutality and cruelty that the Israelis have employed in Gaza. But otherwise, yes, I think we've been here before a whole number of times. We've seen Lebanon being destroyed. We've seen Syria being destroyed. We've seen Iraq being destroyed, and Libya and so on. This is the American empire position, and Israel is the attack dog that does most of the work. So yes, I think we can see no difference. And if you're talking about Arab unity about what? If the only unity at the moment is an agreement not to take action, this is a terrible thing.
Haim, that will have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. I'd like to thank all three of my panelists sincerely so much for taking this time. Greatly appreciated, and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.